Hi, I'm Ivelisse Page, and thanks for listening to the Believe Big podcast, the show where we take a deep dive into your healing with health experts, integrative practitioners, biblical faith leaders, and cancer thrivers from around the globe. Welcome to today's episode on the Believe Big podcast. My name is Ivelisse Page, and it's an honor to spend this time with you. Today, you are in for a treat. Our friend Petra Sovcov, a clinical herbal therapist and doctor of natural medicine, who's based in Vancouver, British Columbia, is here with us today. She is the founder of Healing House Natural Wellness and brings a decade of experience working with individuals facing chronic inflammatory conditions, including cancer and autoimmune disease. Petra also teaches herbal medicine studies and environmental nutrition at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition and is a contracted faculty member at the Wild Rose College, where she teaches anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. She's a graduate of Dominion Herbal College and is also the chair of the board for Herbalists Without Borders International. And she also runs the Vancouver's chapter's Free People's Clinic. Her passion lies in helping people reclaim their health through herbs, dietary changes, and sustainable living, always with a deep respect for the wisdom of both nature and science. When she's not in the clinic or in the classroom, Petra enjoys gardening, preserving heirloom plant varieties, and teaching others how sustainability begins right in our own backyards. Welcome to the podcast, Petra.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited and honored to be here.
Well, we always start our podcast with what our guest's favorite health tip, and I'm sure you have many, but can you share one with us?
Yes. And, funny enough, it has nothing to do with herbal medicine or natural medicine.
Okay, I love it.
It's more about the realm in which that I work and support individuals. And when I'm working with individuals, oftentimes with more complicated scenarios, my best advice that I can offer is slow down. Go ahead and take the time, even when we're in a state where things seem very dire and very sudden and very life-changing. Take the time to slow down and process the news before making decisions.
I love that.
That's my primary advice.
That's great advice.
These individuals or whoever, many of us has been on similar paths before. We're faced with making a decision right away that may or may not alter end results, right? And the other thing is read your labels.
Yes.
As far as living and our nutrition goes, read your labels. Make yourselves very, very familiar with those well-known carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, and neurotransmitter disruptors, because those also have a huge impact in the long-term prognosis of health, because many of these chemicals are fat soluble, which means they build up in the body over time until you reach toxic load and potentially a health crisis.
Very interesting. I didn't know that they were fat soluble. That's very interesting. So for those who are new to the concept of herbal medicine, how would you describe it in your own words?
Well, this is the foundation of all medicine on earth, right? Human beings and plants have a partnership since creation. Our bodies know exactly how to use plants, whether it's through chemistry, whether it's digestion, whether it's the use for healing benefits. And so when I talk about herbal medicine and the roots of herbal medicine, what I will say is that herbal medicine encompasses all cultures, all times, and all peoples. It is truly the people's medicine. And also, current allopathic medicine sits on the shoulders of herbal medicine, with over 70% of our strong pharmaceuticals coming from plant constituents.
I didn't know 70% did. That's amazing.
It's a lot. A lot of our strong medications come from plants. It might not be in the whole sense, but many of the chemotherapy drugs come from various constituents and plants. Many of our very life-saving cardiovascular medications come from plants. A lot of our anti-inflammatories come from plants, and so on and so forth.
Yes. Yeah. And we know mistletoe therapy very well at Believe Big, and it is such a powerful force when it comes to cancer treatments. And here in the United States, it's labeled under the homeopathic pharmacopoeia, not under the herbal medicine, which is why integrative practitioners can use it off-label for cancer. But in general, you know, a lot of people are sometimes concerned with using herbal medicines because their oncologist will say, don't use that. It might counteract what we're trying to do with the chemotherapy. And, you know, so what would be your best advice on one, yes, it's safe to use, or when should you pause in using it in conjunction with chemotherapy?
Yeah. So what I will say first and foremost is, unfortunately, most allopathic practitioners do not have adequate training in herbal medicine. I would love to change that in order for there to be a better partnership. And I would love to take the mystique and the shadow off of herbal medicine and allow practitioners to kind of peek behind the scenes. So what I will say when it comes to issues with cancer and oncology and herbal medicine is, in my opinion, there's a lot more fear than facts. We, of course, know that there are certain classes of herbs and certain classes of drugs that don't go hand in hand, and we've seen it clinically in individuals and human beings. However, a lot of the fear around herbal medicine is around something called theoretical concepts, or it's seen in test tubes, or it's seen in animals. And we know that the human being is not a test tube or a rat, right? So when it comes to that, I generally will say to individuals, make yourself as educated as possible on the herbs that are being suggested and allow for there to be guidance and to make an informed decision.
And so how would someone find a qualified herbalist if they're not near you in Canada? What would be your best advice in order to find somebody that's trusted?
Yeah. So, you know, I thankfully work with individuals in Canada, the US, all over North America. I have clients also in Europe. So grateful for that. But if they're looking to see someone one-on-one in office, there are some wonderful, wonderful ways you can find a certified clinical herbalist. And this is not dispelling the general herbalist or the community herbalist or the master herbalist. But if things are more complicated, you may want a clinical herbal therapist. And that is the highest level of education you can go in herbal medicine. So the American Herbalist Guild is a wonderful resource that can potentially put someone in contact with a clinical herbalist. Of course, Herbalists Without Borders International can maybe help with that as well. And there are various guilds and, I will loosely say, governing bodies for herbal medicine, the BC Association of Herbal Medicine, the Canadian Association for Herbal Medicine. These are places where you get membership based off of the standard of education. So you know that individuals being referred from these places are going to be upheld in that standard of education and are going to have a actual clinical certification, usually from a 4-year program.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
We'll make sure to put that in our show notes for people to be able to find easily. So herbal medicine, I know, can take many forms, from tinctures to teas to capsules. Can you walk us through how these are made and why different forms might be chosen for different things?
Yeah, of course. And that's actually really exciting. Herbal pharmacy or herbal pharmacopoeia. So, you know, a clinical herbalist is going to be trained in how to create these items. A lot of practitioners will refer people out to already created formulations buying from health food stores. And those are fine for general use. They're usually in the scope, from what I've seen, and this is not a blanket statement by any means, but just from what I've seen, these are usually low dose blanketed formulas instead of specifics. So a clinical herbalist is going to be able to make something absolutely specific to the individual's need and to the state that they are in. So oftentimes, for example, what I've run into is if someone, for example, has a very inflamed gastrointestinal tract, and I'm going to make recommendations for an herbal supplement that's already encapsulated, the body's going to have to work extra hard to break that down. So finding the type of formulation that's going to work best for the person's state allows us to then use tinctures, teas, decoctions, sometimes inhalants, sometimes tablets, sometimes capsules. What's key to know is that tinctures, infusions, and decoctions are liquid. Tinctures are something called mark to menstruum. It's a ratio that allows us to make something very strong or drop down. So you have liquid extracts, which are 1:1, 1:2, 1:3. Tinctures, 1:5, 1:7, 1:10. On some herbals that are considered toxic botanicals or dangerous botanicals, we're looking at ratios of 1:30, 1:50, 1:100. And a clinical herbalist is going to know what best to use in these situations. So tincture just means plant matter to alcohol.
Gotcha.
Okay? Tea means plant matter to boiling water sitting in a cup. A decoction is plant matter to boiling water cooked for an X amount of time. Okay. And then the rest we know, tablets, capsules, inhalants, and so forth.
Yeah. We have a local herbalist here in Fort Collins, and it's a wonderful store because you can walk in and one of the women there is a clinical herbalist, and you can share with her what you're experiencing, whether it's really bad cold and specify to what symptoms, or even going through menopause and needing relief. And they can adjust whatever's in your herbal mix based on even allergies. I'm allergic to peppermint. And so it's really hard to find stomach soothing herbs that don't contain peppermint or spearmint, things like that. So yeah, it's really wonderful to be able to have these resources that are super healing and easy for your body to digest and to help your body to absorb well. In the sense of cancer, people who are undergoing conventional treatments like chemotherapy or radiation, are there certain herbs that should absolutely be avoided? Or are there some that you found that really support the body through those treatments?
It's a great question. So, in theory, there's certain classes of herbs or certain actions that we don't want to use with certain pharmaceuticals. So, for example, if someone who is going through their cancer journey is on immune suppressing drugs, we then don't necessarily want to use a class of herbs called immunomodulators or immunostimulants. And a good practitioner is going to know not to do that. There are certainly herbs that we have seen potentially in clinical trials that can actually make these various class of chemotherapy drugs potentially stronger. And we have also seen certain classes of herbs that can help people recover. When I'm working with clients, when they are generally in active chemotherapy, it really depends on what the client is wanting. So I'm working with individuals where I'm trying to support from where they are. And many times that is support after chemotherapy or after radiation. And I'm not the type of client who's going to argue with the oncologist, right? That's not my job. And I have no training as an oncologist. So, if they say no herbs during chemotherapy, then I'm going to respect my client's decision and not push for herbs during chemotherapy, obviously.
Yeah.
But, we've seen, for example, the herb Ganoderma lucidum, which is reishi mushroom. From what we can tell right now, no real known contraindications. Of course, safety's sake, we don't necessarily do it at the same time, but that's a really powerful herbal ally after chemotherapy that can help bring back vitality, energy levels, decrease inflammation, and so forth.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I used to take a mushroom blend even during my cancer journey all those years ago. And I know that it played a huge factor in not only my healing, but also in my vitality and my energy. So
absolutely. There's a lot of herbal allies. And, I can't really say, give a full list, because if someone's listening to this who might have a specific scenario, then I could actually be, causing potential harm. But what I will say is, yes, there are herbs that we can use during various chemo potentially or after.
Yes. Everybody's case is different. And, I'm the same way. I'm very careful not to share exactly what I did during my journey, because people may think, well, I have stage 4 colon cancer as well. I need to do exactly what Ivelisse did. And it's not, there are aspects that are backbones to treatment like mistletoe therapy and herbs and homeopathy and IV vitamin C. All those kinds of things are amazing,
Right.
but everybody is an individual and needs to be treated as such. So I appreciate that you shared that. You also teach about the environmental impact on human health and how important the detoxification, not only in cancer care, but in everyday life. What herbs do you find most effective for gentle yet supportive detox pathways?
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you mentioned detox because I have a talk about detox and detox myth and environmental factors. And so what I say to individuals looking for detoxification, there's detoxification and chelation and let's move things and let's get it out, which can be quite uncomfortable. And then there is detoxification pathway support, where we open all the channels of detoxification and we allow for the body to do what it does naturally. So these are herbs that are like oftentimes lymphatics, liver supporters, blood cleaners, kidney support. One of my favorites, obviously it's used a lot, but Astragalus membranaceus. It's an adaptogen. It helps with the creation of healthy red blood cells. It helps with the creation of healthy white blood cells, helps to boost platelets. So we want things like that. And things that also help with the proper urination and elimination, just opening all channels of elimination because the body does know how to detoxify. So having this conversation in the spring is actually pretty funny because this is when people start detoxifying. And I like to playfully call it diarrhea season. People are going to detoxify in the spring. And a lot of these detoxifying formulas that you see on the market are actually just glorified laxatives with
Really?
with senna and all these herbs that make you go. So it makes you feel like you're detoxifying. But a lot of them, in my opinion, and what's an opinion worth, sometimes miss the mark with not necessarily having herbs that are then going to also support digestion and circulation and kidney health and proper elimination of the other pathways as well. So for detoxification, take heed and take care.
Yes,
for sure.
I tell that to a lot of my friends because, there's lots of things that are out there now and parasite cleanses, you name it, so many. And, if you're not under a doctor's care, and this is even outside of a cancering process, you can really cause your body to become very ill. And so I really feel it's so important to be followed by a practitioner who knows this side of care and that can really help your body to really, like you're saying, detoxify in a gentle way that your body can handle.
And certainly yes and no when it comes to potentials for harm, because, our body, yes, knows what to do with herbs, but certain herbs are considered short-term, low dose, right? And some herbs are very safe for larger doses long-term. So it's just knowing and working with someone who knows how to use those herbs properly is really key. I'm not certain if there's any sort of long-term major danger, but certainly if there's pre-existing complications and pre-existing issues, then you obviously don't want to go and self-dose and self-work.
Yeah. And I'm not so much saying about herbs that people are using, but like there are a lot of kits that are out there that are, in capsules and may not be all herbs. And I just don't know what's involved with many of them that are out there. But I do know that some herbal tinctures for detoxifying don't taste the best. So how can one take these wonderful tinctures and medicine? Is there a way that you've taught your clients in order to be able to handle them?
I just let them suffer a bit. No. So, when it comes to like chronic long-term health issues, there is often the complaint, oh my gosh, that tastes awful. And I say, well, it took us a long time to get to where we are now. And so expecting something that's going to instantly eliminate all the problems and taste wonderful might be a little unrealistic. So what I'll say with the herbs is oftentimes when we're working with very heavy things and we're working with some herbs that really don't taste good, what I'll say, it's short-term pain for hopefully longer-term gain. a tincture, what you do is you pour your dose in a little bit of glass, then you add a bit of hot water to hopefully burn off some of the alcohol, and then you get it done. You can chase it with some juice. You could chase it with some orange juice or something. But when it comes to individuals, for example, who need the herbs in the same sort of strength as a tincture, but cannot handle an alcohol, of course, a qualified herbalist or clinical herbalist will be able to do an extraction, pull the alcohol out, and then replace it with something potentially better tasting. My favorite is I use Manuka honey. A lot of clinical herbalists will create a glycerite, so they'll replace it with glycerin. I don't like glycerin because I don't always know what's in it. It says, various organic vegetable cellulose or whatnot. But with honey or Manuka honey, I know exactly what's going in it. So it's much easier for me to do it that way for individuals who can't necessarily take tinctures.
We hope you're enjoying today's episode on herbal medicine with Petra Sovcov. This spring, Believe Big is working hard to bring hope where it's needed most. And with your help, that hope can bloom. Imagine hearing the words, "Your child has cancer." For Jason and Melissa Jacoby, that devastating reality came when their 2-year-old son Luca was diagnosed with leukemia. It's a nightmare no family should face alone. And that's where you come in. Thanks to generous supporters like you, Believe Big stands with families like the Jacobys, providing financial assistance, vital resources, and access to life-changing integrative care. This spring, you can make hope bloom. Your donation becomes a lifeline, offering relief, healing, and strength to those facing their toughest battle. Get today by texting Believe Big, no spaces, to 53555 on your smartphone. That's Believe Big, BELIEVEBIG, to 53555. Thank you for believing big with us.
So, like with supplements, I often hear that not all herbs are created equal, right? How is the quality sourcing for brand when it comes to herbal products?
So important because the world that we live in is not the world that we lived in even 10, 20, 30 years ago. A lot of our global soils are heavily impacted with agrochemicals. And these agrochemicals, unfortunately, we don't necessarily know their entire lifespan and how long they go in the soil. All we know is that they build up strength over time. So here's what I will say about herbs is, in my opinion, is that it's very important for a couple things to be front center for individuals wanting to use herbal medicine. One is make sure that if you are getting herbs from a supplier or a clinician or whatever, that they are certified organic and grown for herbal medicine. Why is this? Twofold. One is that many of our herbs are endangered or heavily impacted in the wild.
Yeah.
It's my opinion that many of the herbs need to remain herbs in the wild so we have them for future generations. So if growers are growing them on a farm, they're grown for herbal medicine. We're not taking them from the wild. Now, that is this. However, I also do wildcraft, but I'm wildcrafting in a very respectful manner for the plant and for the land, not taking from areas that are heavily impacted or that have herbs that are endangered. So I'm harvesting things like dandelion, chickweed, things that are in abundance in the wild from safe locations. The other thing is making certain that the supplier, if you're, for example, getting a full product, like a tincture formulation from a supplier, pay attention to the manufacturing facilities, because of the possibility for cross-contamination for benzene products or other inflammatory chemicals that are actually dangerous can be present. So knowing how they're manufacturing their formulas, where and what kind of cleaners they're using, what kind of lubricants they're using, is going to have an impact, because there is, of course, the potential for cross-contamination, and that just can potentially impact the illness further.
Yes. Yeah. And explain to people too. I think this is an aspect that sometimes we don't realize when we're purchasing herbal teas from not even just from the store. It could be a wonderful organic tea, but then the bag that they put it in, they have plastic in it.
Encrypting chemicals? Is that what we're talking
Yes.
about? My favorite topic in the whole wide world.
Yes. And so it's really frustrating that you have this beautiful organic herbs and then they're laden in this plastic tea bag or in a bleached tea bag. So what are your recommendations for people to safely take herbs?
So formulations in a paper bag,
yes,
going to be your friends, right? Your herbalist, if you're purchasing from an herbalist, it's very good if those formulas are stored in glass and then go from the glass container to your paper bag. Doesn't have to be fancy. It might not have a fancy, beautiful label, but it's probably going to be safer. Herbs coming in tea bags. That's a tough one because oftentimes people don't have access to an herbal dispensatory or an apothecary. And so they'll buy things at a store from a great producer, but those tea bags are often made out of plastics, and then you get microplastics, and then you get phthalates, and then we've got endocrine disruptors and xenoestrogens, and it's just a big mess. So avoid as much as possible, in my opinion, herbs that are in plastic-based tea bags. My own formulations come to people in non-fancy paper, and I actually give everybody organic cotton tea bags that are reusable. So, things like that are a better option if you are dealing with a chronic inflammatory issue or a health crisis. We want to mitigate as much environmental toxin and as much environmental toxin exposure as possible. And it is enlightening, but also can be frightening to see just how polluted our world has become. And we don't necessarily share the information about microplastics and endocrine disruptors and how these literally build up over time. And our endocrine system is the master system of our body. Every single cellular metabolic function is driven by hormones, the endocrine system. From the thought in your head to the digestion to the poo, it's all hormones.
Yes, yes. And you just said something, that I wanted you to touch on in the last few minutes that we have. Mm-hmm. We know that the mind-body connection plays a huge role in healing. How does herbal medicine support the emotional health or mental clarity for someone, let's say, navigating a cancer diagnosis?
Oh boy. That's, such a huge part. And I see time and time again in cases where trauma is a big driver towards illness. And we know that trauma is inflammatory. I'm not even talking about herbal medicine right now. I'm just talking about clinical science. That trauma and unprocessed trauma is pro-inflammatory, and it sets off the inflammatory system. And eventually that inflammatory cycle becomes self-perpetuating with pro-inflammatory messengers. And so part of healing is resolution through somatic therapy, talk therapy, and so forth. So what herbs can do, what can herbs do in these kind of situations? It's kind of a little bit of a love letter to chemistry, in that certain herbs can help mitigate the damage from pro-inflammatory messengers and could potentially help turn off the inflammatory cycle and restore it to normal function. However, that's not possible without work from the individual, working through that trauma, processing it, getting it out of the body as much as possible, which is where herbal medicine and somatic and herbal medicine and talk therapy can be so incredibly powerful as a combined force.
What herbs are great to combine with somatic and talk therapy? Are you thinking things like chamomile or different things?
No, because chamomile is sedating and gentle, and it's a digestive. I'm talking about bigger guns here.
Okay. I want to hear it.
Some of my favorites. So I'm going to say these as some of my favorite. with the commentary, please do not self-dose. Please do not self-formulate. But some of my favorites for chronic inflammatory, heavy inflammatory inflammation caused by trauma, cat's claw, Uncaria tomentosa, super anti-inflammatory. Herbs like Stachys officinalis, now called Stachys botanica. This is heart's ease. It's been around. We've used it since medieval times. Wood betony. This helps with. It's traditionally used to lighten the load of trauma and heartbreak. And I don't know if science has caught up to necessarily how this works, but what I've seen is it helps regulate the nervous system, helps regulate nerve responses. Okay. And then there's other ones that we don't necessarily talk about, not overly well known. And a tender plant. I don't know if I really want to mention this, but I will mention this for practitioners who are able to get it in a sustainable way, and that's ghost pipe mushroom for complex PTSD. And PTSD can help mitigate or compartmentalize some of these traumatic and overwhelming feelings.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Petra, for all of that you shared today on the episode. It was packed with information and tips that I know is going to allow people to dig into this side of healing a little bit further. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure entirely.
Yes. So if someone would want to reach out to you to get more information for their specific case, Petra, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, healinghouseherbal.com, or email at me at healinghouseherbal@gmail.com. Either myself or my assistant will get back. And email is fine. There's a number for the wellness clinic if needed, also on the website. And I would be happy to have a chat if someone needs help.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll look forward to hearing from you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you. And my pleasure entirely.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support our podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Be sure to visit believebig.org to access the show notes and discover our bonus content. Thanks again, and keep believing big.